approval to have commingling.
Any questions or concerns? Moved by Bean, second by Marshall. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion
Aye.
carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2.2, request from RE Arena Incorporated for amendment to their Class 8.3 alcoholic beverage license. Mr. Swanson.
Mr. Sandy, members of the Committee of the Whole, you have in your packet or online a proposed draft ordinance. You've had this opportunity previously to consider the request from REA. The ordinance before you has been shared with the REA people. We've had good discussion about it. I think they are in agreement with the draft of the ordinance. Essentially what it does, it provides an opportunity for either the REA or the Alerus Center, if they are promoting events off their site, and there are certain requirements as to the definition of promotion, that they can ask for those to be located off-site and that they could serve alcoholic beverages at. It's truly a policy decision for the council to make. There is one error in the draft ordinance that you have before you. It is in subsection 3. It now says that no beverages shall be sold in glass bottles or metal cans. There was a prior change, and so metal cans are allowed, glass bottles are not. So that will be corrected for council, but otherwise I believe the ordinance is in order for your consideration. Mr. Hodgson is here. If he wishes to speak, he may, but we've had some communication back and forth, and I think at this stage the ordinance is drafted in a manner which is consistent with their request.
Mr. Swanson, are there any comments? Yes, Mr. Bean. No problem.
The history of why, was this considered at one time previously? Or did you
No.
not? So they've never talked about.
To my knowledge, the council has never considered a request of this nature. When the liquor licenses were established for both the REA and the Alerus Center, they were considered to be limited or special licenses only eligible for those two locations. They were considered to be mirror images of each other, and at the time they were created, it was intended to apply only to those premises. So to my recollection and knowledge, this is the first time a request of this nature has come either from the Alerus Center or REA.
But in the creation of the original ordinance, was there discussion at that time about expanding it, ability to be outside of their own facilities?
No, the discussion at that time was limited to those facilities, the Alerus Center and the REA.
It was intended to do that.
Correct.
And so this is a reversal from the original intent?
I don't know that I'd call it a reversal. It's an expansion of the original intent.
Ms. Marshall?
I'm wondering if, there will be or any criteria for the type of event that this would cover. I know an issue has been raised, and maybe Mr. Vastrek wants to speak to this. I know there was an email that went out about events that might be centered around kids' activities, where there might be an event, say at the Icon Ice Arena, involving kids hockey, or that kind of thing. If there will be any distinction made in the selection of what kinds of events are appropriate and or not.
I've not been provided any of that communication. I've not been involved in any of those discussions. The way the ordinance is drafted now, it is limited to a sporting or entertainment event that is promoted by either the REA or the Alerus. Location is open. The type of event, other than being an entertaining event or a sporting event, is open. So I don't know that I can give you further insight into that issue.
Well, I wondered if Mr. Vastrek wants to speak to that at all. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Bill Vasicek, 1415 Walnut. President Sandy, members of the council. I'm representing the Grand Forks Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition tonight, and our main concern is we were understanding that one of the reasons for the change of license was so that they could provide alcohol when they rented arenas like the Icon. And when I looked up the Icon, it says it's a youth arena, and now we're going to allow a bar in a youth arena. And I know it's not for a youth game, it's 18 and under hockey tournament sponsored by the Ralph Engelstad Arena. But I'm concerned about opening that door is like, once we have a bar there, how many other events are we going to serve alcohol? Is it going to be the figure skating championship, the youth hockey, the Pee Wee championship? Where are we going to stop? And so currently I oppose on that reason. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I just wanted to get that out there for the consideration of the other council members, that there was some concern raised, and I don't know if others also received that concern, but I think it's one that is worthy of consideration as we go forward.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall and Mr. Blasicek. Yes, Mr. Wright?
Mr. Swanson, would these events come back to us for approval?
Typically not. They'd be handled in a similar nature as to the Class 11. Those are reviewed administratively. In talking with Mr. Hodgson, what I envisioned, or what I told him I envisioned, would be communication to the finance office of what events they are seeking authorization for, the promotional criteria, in other words, what's their involvement, and then the specific location, date, hours, things of that nature. If council wanted it to come back to council, it certainly can be drafted that way, but in discussions with finance, we anticipate handling it similar to a Class 11.
Perfect. I'm in support of this. I think that, we just looked at a couple of events where we're looking at commingling. And I'd agree with Mr. Blasicek. I don't think beer should be served at a 5-year-old hockey game. Either people drinking in the parking lot or inside the arena. I think we all agree with that. But I do think there's an opportunity for the Ralph or the Alerus Center to bring in maybe smaller acts that don't fit the Ralph Engelstad Arena, but maybe a smaller venue would be great. I think it brings more into the community, and I think has an opportunity to be positive. I think we should, when we look at our ordinances, we should always look to evaluate them and be understanding and see what we can do to work with our local businesses here in the city. So with that, I'll move approval.
Moved by Weigel. Yeah, Ms. Doppler, would you like to say something?
So while I agree that it would be nice to be able to bring in smaller acts that wouldn't necessarily be financially conducive to the bottom line for the REA or for the Alerus Center, I do have some issues with giving away all of our proverbial power, I guess, when it comes to planning some of these events. And so I would be interested in an amendment or changing the ordinance to match what you had suggested earlier, Mr. Swanson, about having those events come back to us for approval within a certain size or amount of expected people to attend when it does involve alcohol.
Thank you, Ms. Doppler. Mr. Veen?
Mr. Hodgson, talk a little bit more about what your intent is.
There is a motion on the floor. Is there a second to the motion? For continued discussion?
Second to get the discussion going.
Second by Marshall for continued discussion. Thank you, Ms. Marshall. Mr. Hodgson?
President Sandy and members of the council. Yeah, I think I agree with Bill 100%. When you talk about the types of events where we would seek to sell, we absolutely don't seek to be involved with youth hockey tournaments or youth sporting events, so to speak. I brought up the World Under 18 Championship event that we did in 2016 as a sample of a prior event where we hosted games both at the Ralph and at Icon. We sold beer and wine at the Ralph for the events that were there. We did not when we had similar events in the games at the Icon. So what really I'm talking about would be the opportunity to try and develop new incremental events in the community. For example, we're in discussions with Live Nation today on a small concert event that makes sense at the Chester Fritz in our community, but doesn't make sense at the Alerus or the Ralph due to its size. So the opportunity for that new incremental event to sell and generate revenue is really the difference between whether you proceed or not. If you're looking at the risk and reward ratio and you say, hey, the addition of that opportunity, as well as from the guest experience or the fan experience to make that product available at that type of event, is probably the difference that tips it to say, hey, that's worth chasing. That's one to try to do. So from a competition standpoint, I really respectfully don't think we'd compete with anybody who's got a Class 1 license. If we don't chase it or don't do the event's not coming to the community, so it's not happening anyway. So I think the new programming that we could bring to the town by chasing some of those things is going to benefit those in the hotel industry and the restaurant industry and others. So we're certainly not trying to expand the availability of alcohol at events that are youth-oriented or for kids, and that's not our goal at all. But when we do have a financial risk on an event, there are some there when you look at that risk and reward, where that revenue stream, quite honestly, tips the scale and says, hey, that's worth chasing. It's not the best analogy, but as a concert promoter in Grand Forks, we say you better make your money in beer parking and popcorn, or you're not going to make any money. And that's when you talk about the margins and how tight they are, it's something for us to chase.
Mr. Hodgson, can you tell me a little bit about timing? Ms. Dockler had mentioned maybe if we could have some sort of oversight on what events you'd be doing. Is it possible? I can only imagine that timing is very difficult when you're looking at whatever event you're talking about with Live Nation, because you need to be able to respond to it today, which makes it very difficult to bring an event back to 2 city council meetings and where it's public of what you're trying to do, and then go back to the event promoters or the entertainment to try to get them to come. Would it even be possible? How would we work that out?
Yeah, I would say it might be possible in some instances, but not in the majority of them. Our industry is pretty fluid, and Grand Forks isn't a must-stop on most concert routing tours. So there's lots of times where a decision is made pretty quickly, where it's, hey, somebody's routing through, how quickly can we make a deal here or make a decision? So there are some that have a longer lead time for sure, but I don't think those longer lead ones are the smaller events that we would propose for this type of event. Usually the bigger events have a longer lead time on the routing and the touring. For the type of event that we're talking about, in most instances, the likely scenario would be, hey, we're playing Shooting Star and we're going to go play another casino somewhere. We've got a Saturday night off. Does it make sense to have an event in Grand Forks on their night off? So respectfully, I think that would work sometimes, but I also think the majority of instances, decisions are made quicker than would be permissible, as I understand the process.
Mr. Reed?
Besides the Chester Fritz Auditorium, what other venues do you think you would possibly be utilizing in something like this?
Not many. We do a dueling piano show at the Empire. We do 2 nights of that. There might be some other stuff at the Empire on a smaller scale, but not many. We've had some discussions with promoters about the validity of doing some stuff down on the river, down in the Greenway, trying to create some outdoor amphitheater type programming, but none of that is very solid at this point. So
The ordinance as written would allow you to go any place that's, I mean, it doesn't restrict you. You could go to the Icon if in fact there was a reason to go.
yes, I believe it would, as long as the Icon was agreeable to that. That'd be a requirement.
That would be, but I mean, the reality is what you're saying is probably very few. The ordinance is somewhat wide open when it says it doesn't have any limitation.
I would agree with that. The frequency of the instances is not what I would call significant.
Mr. Hodgson, I would liken this a little bit to an event the Alaris Center did recently where they had Rick Springfield.
Correct.
Rick Springfield came and he didn't play in their arena, did he? I mean, are you familiar with that concert that they had?
Yeah, like the ballroom is places are going to do,
How
yeah.
many, do you have any idea what the capacity is of the, I don't know if, does anybody here know what the capacity of the Alaris Center ballroom?
I think it would depend on their configuration and stage size and such.
1,000?
Yeah, Chester Fritz is about 2,300, so.
So it's similar to the Chester Fritz, only you don't have a Chester Fritz attached to your building, but the Alaris Center does,
Right.
right? So in some circumstances, then although you have the same liquor license as the Alaris, they have other opportunities that you don't, which is, in my opinion, what you're trying to expand so that you can provide similar programming that the Alaris Center does.
Yeah, we have a very good working relationship with them. Like, I think if we creatively, there could be some things we chase together or do separately, but I think it would be the same for them, same opportunity, and I know Anna's supportive of the concept.
Mr. Reed?
You know, right now, as you looked at what we earlier approved with Brick and Barney and El Rocco and some of those others, is it not feasible for you to use existing establishments to still do what you want to do and keep them as a part of
It is.
equation?
Yeah, it would be. The response to that would be by the time you're done cutting up the pie and everybody getting their share, so to speak, as the event promoter with the financial risk to the artist or the act, the margins get pretty thin.
So without this, these events wouldn't come to town?
There are many in that situation that I wouldn't chase, that we wouldn't chase.
So how do we differentiate what you would do and what the Alaris Center would do? Would you not also be competing for that same concert or whatever?
I think you'd incentivize both to chase as many as they could get.
The difference, I think, is the Alaris Center is scalable. I mean, they can scale, as you just said, from a small concert to a large concert on site.
Right.
And so that venue can do that, and now we're creating some level of competition between the city-owned venue and what you're trying to do.
Boy, I sure don't see it that way. Like, I think that's kind of a side view of competition in terms of, I think it's programming that's not occurring in the community in general. I know when you talk to about our relationship with the Alaris Center, both of us quite often say, as long as it doesn't go to Fargo and ends up in Grand Forks, we win as a community. So nobody's getting rich as a concert promoter in Grand Forks.
And I guess to that end, Mr. Dean, whether it ends up at the Alaris or at the Ralph at one of the other venues, I think it's good for our community, regardless of which event books the opportunity, personally.
I would agree.
Ms. Mock, do you have any questions?
So part of my understanding is that these types of events are kind of exclusive to promoters. So this isn't, in essence, this isn't competition with some of the other bars in town because they couldn't attract these types of events. Is that correct?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. And then, I guess kind of on the thinking with the Alaris Center, I don't typically plan these types of events, especially at this scale, but, I know when you think about restaurants, they could be viewed as direct competition or they can be viewed as kind of a collective whole. And so the more variety you have, the more you can appeal to people. Is that sort of the way you would view this with the Alaris? Is the more venues we have available, the more we can attract different events?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also about providing a programming mix for the community. We did a PJ Masks, a family show at the Chester Fritz, where we promoted it at that venue because it was a better size. We're going to do a show with Feld Entertainment there in January, another kids show. So those are shows that are not relevant to this alcohol discussion we're having, but I think they're shows that are needed in the community, and there's a hole there in the programming mix. So it makes more sense to do those at the Chester Fritz, given their capacity and our anticipated attendance, and it does to do them in our venue.
Thank you, Jeannie. Mr. Bean?
I
Thank
think
you.
one thing that makes this a little bit unique is you take on the whole risk, right?
Correct.
Or normally, so you kind of become the promoter, is that, can you explain that a little bit? Because unlike others, I don't know how your other concepts go, you take on a lot of risk when you do this, which not a lot of people can do, probably you and the Alara Center, right?
Yeah, in most artist arrangements, right, you're paying a guarantee to the artist before you sell a single ticket, right? So you're on the hook for an artist guarantee plus all the event expenses. And usually your deal is a dollar amount versus 90% of the net after expenses. So as a promoter, your upside strictly on the show might be limited to 10% after all expenses if you can get to percentage. So the margins are thin. That's my comment about the ancillary revenue streams. You better make it on beer, parking, and popcorn, or you're not going to make it.
So if you do the Chester Fritz, do you lease that space from them?
Yes.
Is that how that works?
Yes, like we did the PJ Masks show last week where we rented the venue from them and promoted the show. Took the risk, promoted the show.
Mr. Weigel?
Jody, when you say risk, that could be anywhere from $10,000 to $250,000, right? I mean, it could be a substantial amount of money that you're risking to.
I wish it was limited to $250,000, but you're right. It could be as small as a $10,000 guarantee, or it could be a $600,000 guarantee to an artist.
Do you have any other comments or questions? We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Ms. Dockler dissents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 2.3, noisy party ordinance discussion. Mr. Swanson, good evening again.
In the meeting packet is a most recent draft of an ordinance which would remove the loud party ordinance from a criminal offense under our city code to a non-criminal offense. And it's there for your consideration. There is one slightly complicating factor, and that is under current law, which will change August 1. If you have 2 or more of the same offenses within a calendar year, it then has to be charged out as a misdemeanor. That will change as of August 1, the time and the number changes. So as the draft is here now, it meets current law, but it will not be consistent with law after August 1. That doesn't really affect the discussion as to whether it should or shouldn't be a criminal offense, but it does affect the penalty section. So I'm certainly available to answer any questions you may have on the draft. One consideration I might suggest is that whatever changes are made be effective August 1 or later, so that we can incorporate the change in state law. But I can respond to any questions or concerns the council may have with regard to this draft.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Ms. Marshall?
Oh, yes, I was wondering, and generally I like this ordinance change, but I also don't want to disempower our police force from being able to take appropriate action when there is a loud party going on in a neighborhood. And so I'm wanting to see all sides of this to make sure that we're not, in essence, making their job more difficult. And so I wondered if Chief Nelson might see him getting up and might have something to say about this.
President Sandy, members of the council, thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I understand this is a policy decision, and as a police department, we will respectfully go along with whatever is decided. However, right now, I cannot come out in support of this. Just for an example, this weekend, we got called to a house to a second time for a party. The only thing that allowed us to break up that party was telling this individual if he did not cooperate, he would be arrested and taken to jail. I do not believe that a $300 infraction is going to be enough of a deterrent to allow us to break up loud parties. Mr. Weigel, we had provided you with some stats. If you want to look back to calls for service for loud parties in 2005, were 966 calls for loud parties. In 2018, down to 561, and so far this year, 84. Last year, a total of 19 citations were issued. Now, mind you, loud party, when you look at 19 citations, doesn't necessarily mean those were all to hosts. That could have been under the failure to disperse part of loud party as well. So we do have some concerns. I merely am voicing my concerns from a public safety perspective. I understand as the governing body, you're taking the whole community approach and are going to make whatever decision you make, but in good faith, I can't support this ordinance as written. Or we can't, I should say.
Hey, Chief, any questions for Chief Nelson? Just what?
Chief, this is different conversation than when you and I spoke and I initially brought this up. And your words to me were, something to the effect of I can understand it as long as we keep the failure to disperse.
Your conversation to me, Mr. Weigel, was we're thinking on looking at this, what do you think? And I'm not going to tell you what you can look at and what you can't, but not seeing a draft of the ordinance, I understand why you're looking at it through your perspective, and I understand that through your eyes, and now through my eyes, this is my version.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. Any other questions for the Chief? Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Weigel?
I'll make a couple quick comments. I think, in speaking with Ms. Dockler, there was an issue brought up in Ward 2 and throughout the campus district, and this is a solution to that issue. I've heard people say that if a joint powers agreement, it was signed between the two law enforcement agencies in Grand Forks, that the other agency could enforce that. I disagree with that. I spoke briefly with Mr. Swanson today. I've read the law in regards to that. The wording that's in there, I don't believe it fits with the joint powers agreement. Would allow the other police department to cite the municipal code for noisy party. Mr. Swanson, have you had an opportunity to review that at all?
No, what you and I spoke about today would require me to obtain the legislative history from the Legislative Counsel's office. I think you and I spoke about 3:30 this afternoon, and I've not had that opportunity. If that's an issue, if the concern is what effect the joint powers agreement would have upon the ability of the UND Police Department to enforce a city ordinance, I'd like to have that opportunity to do that research properly. That's not something that can be done easily online. We'd request the full legislative history first.
I don't want to rush into this. I don't want it's something to be done tonight or tomorrow. That's never been my intent. It's been more so to bring up and have a discussion about it. I've had the opportunity to speak to student leaders on campus. I've had the opportunity to speak to residents that live within the city of Grand Forks, and so far I haven't heard a whole lot of negative about this ordinance. Is it perfect? Probably not, but at the same time, if there's an issue, then we need to find a solution to it, and I think this might be the best way to look at it. So, like I said, I don't want to see this, I'd ideally like to move this on past tonight, but not vote on it at a council side for another month or two before we can have Mr. Swanson follow up and do his due diligence with making sure the law's crafted the way it should be.
Well, I think we're talking two separate issues with all due respect. I think the question with regard to a joint powers agreement has a broader application and connotation than simply a loud party ordinance. And I'm not entirely clear on what issues were raised in the neighborhood meeting that would lead you to this draft. I do understand that there is some sentiment to changing the penalty for loud party ordinance from a criminal offense to a non-criminal offense for other reasons, employment reasons and so forth. But it may be the two of you, having attended the ward meetings, could give me a little more insight as to what the neighborhood feels is a concern, because I would be surprised if the neighborhood would appreciate the difference between a criminal offense and a non-criminal offense. I'm assuming the concerns that were raised was whether or not the University of North Dakota Police Department was enforcing the city ordinance on loud party as opposed to the Grand Forks Police Department enforcing it. If that's the issue, then I understand where the joint powers agreement discussion comes in. But I'm not real clear on what issues that you thought the draft here was attempting to address, other than changing the penalties from a criminal to non-criminal. And if there is a multiple offense under current law and under law after August 1, that may still be a criminal offense due to multiple violations within a given period of time. So
within the ward meetings, that's something that was brought up. Whether the UND Police Department could enforce that, and if they couldn't, why? And obviously, once you explain the Century Code, how it's written, the only thing that the UND Police Department can cite into municipal court is an infraction or non-criminal. Anything that is a misdemeanor or above has to go through district court. And obviously, there is no state statute for noisy party. It's not against state law, it's only against city ordinance. So that's where that was brought up.
And so the rest of the council has the benefit of the discussion that Councilmember Weigel and I had this afternoon. There are two subsections under the authority of the UND Police Department, or any university police department for that matter. And one references misdemeanors, the other references criminal offenses and infractions. And so with that distinction in terminology, I want to look to the history to see if they were intending any different effect by those two subdivisions. The phrase says notwithstanding any other provision of law or joint powers agreement. We just want to take a look at that, and I haven't had that chance.
Mr. Green?
Ms. Weigel, would it be worthwhile to just hold this for 2 weeks or a month, and then when we got more clarity, come back and talk about it?
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. Like I
So
said,
I don't even know if we have, I don't know, officially have to table it, or we can just hold it up because you're.
Mr. Swanson, how much time would you like to do the research on the joint powers agreement?
Well, I would anticipate that Legislative Council will be able to get copies of those documents fairly easily. I would like to have the opportunity to confer with the city prosecutor on it, so I don't know that it would be in a position in 2 weeks, but I would expect 4 weeks to be adequate. Having said that, I think we'll be bringing forward a number of changes in the city code to accommodate the legislative changes that were adopted this last session as well. Whether you want that as separate matters or as part of this item wouldn't matter to us, but the city prosecutor and I have had an opportunity last week to go through. She provided me a list of changes that she's recommending to comply with state changes. So, in direct answer to your question, if we could delay it for approximately a month, that would be, I think, appropriate.
First committee of the whole meeting in July? Okay with everybody?
And if for some reason we're not ready for that, I'll just notify the finance department not to put it on the agenda. But I think that would be the target that we'd be shooting for.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. Moving on. Item 2.4, Public Arts Commission, Public Artwork Agreement for the Northern Rose Sculpture. Mr. Gangler, good evening.
Good evening. Tonight, in addition to city staff, we do have representative from AE2S as well as the PAC, Public Arts Commission, in the event we have additional questions. As we highlighted in the staff report, a number of things have occurred over time. In 2014 and some of the earlier days with discussions with PAC, we did draft an overall MOU that was to sort of cover the entire relationship between the city, PAC, and a variety of other elements that ultimately would lead to an overall memorandum that covers the entire program itself. That sort of was shelved, so to speak. Nothing was acted upon at that time. And then in 2017, with the assistance of the city attorney's office, we did draft an agreement between the city and PAC that would, at that time, have covered a proposed art sculpture that would have been located on the undeveloped lot on South Columbia Road, South 42nd Street and Demers. That project has then shifted a little bit. Now we do have a proposed sculpture project referred to as the Northern Rose, which was presented to the City Council on May 20th. So we don't intend this evening to go through that entire presentation again. And in understanding that the current agreement that we do have that was for the previous art sculpture, I've talked with Mr. Swanson a few times, and we think that that document, we just need to take another look at it and change some of the more specific references, obviously, to where it's located. But what I tried to do in my staff report, where you see several bullets, those are all the main headings that are within the agreement. That I would say most of them are in good working order. However, there are a few that still need further clarification. Things like who's ultimately responsible for maintaining the landscaping area around the sculpture. We've had discussions with the Park District, who has agreed that they could do that type of maintenance, but that still does need to be further clarified among some of the other provisions. So we did have AE2S do some preliminary engineering work. I believe tomorrow a crew is going to be out to actually do some soil bore testing in the proposed area. As it's been noted, the sculpture itself could be in the upwards of roughly 150 tons, so it will need an engineered foundation underneath it. And another highlight, as you recall, coming out of 2016, out of the Mayor's Vibrancy Committee for Arts and Events, a 30% set aside was intended to be, in this case, 2017, 18, and 19, which the numbers are reflected in the staff report, for that dollar amount, which equates to a little over $112,000, to be used for public art as it relates to infrastructure support for those given projects. So I think tonight, and of course we'll entertain questions, but staff is asking for the direction to continue to work with the city attorney's office to finish the needed work on the agreement itself. We think it is also, on a parallel track, important to note that the memorandum of understanding still does need to, at some point, be finalized and be brought forward. Staff is suggesting that those two can exist with the intent of trying to move this first project along through the actual specific agreement, but continue to work and shore up all the things needed on the overall memorandum of understanding, which is going to take some time with multiple parties involved. So with that, I would open it up to any specific questions you might have for myself, for PAC, or for AE2S.
Any comments or questions? Mr. Gangler, I have a couple questions.
Please.
Mine are most related to procedures, timing. So the 30% set aside came out of the Mayor's Vibrancy Committee. Under what process did we just go along with setting that 30% aside? Did that document come to the City Council for ratification?
That was discussions through the budget process, is my understanding. When those recommendations came forward in the 2017 budget process, it was noted that the recommendation was to look at this 30% set aside. I don't know if I can find an actual in-writing document. Nothing's been, I guess, brought to my attention, but through discussions through those budget processes is my understanding of where that came from.
But the mayor is fully aware of that, and as part of the mayor's budget, that's what he wanted.
Correct.
Very good. Related to timing and procedures on these issues, there was a presentation that we received about this specific sculpture, but it was informative, not looking for us to agree with this is a great art project and give the thumbs up on it. Who's making the decision as to what projects we're moving forward and versus what we're not moving forward?
Well, with the way way PAC was structured in those original discussions, the city for quite some time, as far as how we were going to draft that original memorandum, for example, of understanding, it was PAC's responsibility to bring forward the given art projects opposed to the city choosing or picking those specific projects. It's just that this is the first time that it's really come to fruition in terms of bringing something real forward. So it's my understanding, and I think it's been sort of the understanding of all concerned, that PAC would come forward with given projects, whereas it wasn't necessarily the responsibility of the city council to say yes or no specifically.
Very good, which I'm in full agreement of that, because I don't want to be the one deciding what is art and what isn't. So I think it's great that PAC is working on that. Is that also, my last comment question, is that also why we've engaged with an engineering company and are already spending money on doing engineering when none of us have been asked to give the formal approval on this project? Because the mayor has already set aside the money in the future budgets, so the funding is already there, which is why we're doing this procedurally rather than when the project is talked about, coming to the city council and asking for approval. Are you following my logic?
Right. I think staff understood that we were in a position to be able to start some of the initial work. In terms of the proposed timeline, which we talked about when PAC most recently came to us, it's under a timeline such that we needed to get something in place to start this early preliminary engineering, knowing that this agreement has to follow suit along with it. So to date now, we're finally at a position where at least we're able to allow AE and their services to look at the soil stability and those types of things. And again, because the agreement has never been finalized, that's why we're bringing it forward to you right now, in hopes of that's how each individual project will work in the future, that in one way, shape, or form, it'll come back in an agreement form per site. We might have some sites that might be wholly on private property, for example, but yet we're still going to be involved in one way or another. So.
Someone that travels extensively around the world, I see public art everywhere, mostly in much larger cities than Grand Forks, but I think it adds an element that whether you're an art fan or not, I think it just adds a lot to communities and the look of the community. And so I'm very happy that we're moving forward with public art in general. I'm not sure this is my favorite project, but I'm not sure it's not my favorite project either. So I appreciate all the work everyone's been doing. Any other comments here, Mr. B?
Mr. Kangler, the MOU, that process started some time ago, is that right?
The draft MOU that we have now was drafted in 2014.
Why have we not finalized the MOU?
I think there was probably a lot of factors over time. There was a slightly different council membership at that time. There was a number of discussions that occurred in terms of how much money would or would not be set aside. The planning department had provided more routine staffing support for PAC at that time, and then there were some decisions made that until they needed us more in the fray, we wouldn't be involved necessarily in their ongoing staff meetings. So I can't probably point my finger to one exact reason why it's not, other than it was just a function of time. It just wasn't brought forward. It wasn't pushed probably by all parties concerned.
So how long do you think it could be before we would have an MOU?
I think using the current draft, it's just a matter of re-engaging the appropriate parties who were a part of it at the time and bringing it forward. I would hope, within a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, to at least have something to bring forward. Again, on a parallel track with this specific agreement for this location that I think is probably more time critical and time sensitive to get that done.
So if and when the MOU is done, that would be kind of the basic agreement we would have, and then each individual would have its own sub-agreement then?
That's the way it's being framed right now, unless council...
We're doing it all in one agreement, and there wouldn't be the two. Could we do them parallel, a permanent MOU at the same time as we try to do this individual agreement, and not hold up the project?
I think we can certainly, of course, I can't make promises whether it's 1 week or 2 weeks, but, staff can do our part. Again, there's other entities that are involved to be re-engaged with in the bigger picture for the MOU, but it's something that staff can certainly, try to accomplish.
Because I think we would like to see what that looks like, and the sooner probably the better, just so we know, like the basic question you said for maintenance. This first project, that's on city property, is it?
Correct.
It's not on public right-of-way, it's going to be on city property.
Right. It's in the bermed area of a parking lot opposed to right-of-way.
Yeah, so will we ultimately have to subdivide that, or does that grant some level of easement, or how would we handle, where does PAC's responsibility start and end versus the city's? Is there going to need to be parking adjacent to this site? I mean, I think that it's right next to a parking lot, so I'm assuming. I just don't know if that is impacted at all by Can-Am Inn, or what agreements we may have with them, or are there any agreements with them?
Right. In terms of, for example, some of the work that AE is doing, ultimately will have produced for us essentially what would be a site plan that would function not only for, the specific project itself, but also function as an easement, or at least, the specifics of where it's located. But within the framework of the agreement, we do need to specify, on the one hand, the Can-Am Inn is not the property owner, of course, the city is, but the city has a long-standing existing agreement with the Can-Am that calls out how many parking stalls that they're allotted. I just confirmed with the Alaris today that it's the Can-Am for their portion of what they're leasing. They're responsible for the maintenance of the bermed area, snow removal. So those are some of the finer points I think that do need to be clarified. So far, as indicated in the letter of support, that the Can-Am has, they're pretty excited about the project. With the letter of support and with some verbal confirmations that we've had with them. But we still need to get that clarified. It's possible that maybe 2 parking stalls might have to be taken out to accommodate the foundation. We won't know that for sure until the engineering work is done to accomplish that. But those are a couple of key points that do need to be probably further clarified in the agreement.
One thing, one of my last items is just on cost. We know we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 75,000, I suppose, plus or minus, is that right?
The current estimate for the engineering services was 25,000, and just the current rough estimate for the actual construction costs of the foundation was noted as 50,000. As time goes by, we'll have a more definite, probably, picture of what those numbers are, but that's the amount we're working with now to be used out of that 112,000 set aside.
And this was probably a little abnormal for the expense. I would think future sites probably not as expensive, right?
I would anticipate not receiving, hopefully, more than one 150-ton sculpture.
Yeah, because you are using, of your 112, I mean, 75, or it could be more, there's a lot of money going toward this one site.
Yes.
But again, that's what PAC wants to do.
That is the request at hand, right?
With its size, I think it will be impactful as well. Ms. Marshall, did you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo support of the sentiments that President Sandy spoke to regarding the value of public art in a community. I think this will be, whether you like the idea of this particular piece or not, and I think it's kind of cool, it will add to the aesthetics of our community. And so I would just make the motion to support the ongoing work of the staff with the city attorney's office to develop the agreement.
There's a motion, is there a second? Second by Weigel. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying
Mr. Sandy?
yes. Ms.
Mr. Sandy? Sorry.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm struggling, thank you. I'm struggling to understand why we would move forward with an agreement without putting an MOU in place. Procedurally, I feel like we could be working on both at the same time, and much of the information we need for the agreement, we need to have in the MOU. So I don't know why I guess sort of the way I see it is the MOU needs to be in place so that both parties are clear on roles and responsibilities, and especially when we get to things like the park district playing a role, I think that we need to have something in writing with them as well, and clearly laid out. And then the agreement is more of the site-specific details that would have to be worked out for each piece. So I guess I really would like to see an MOU being worked on and put in place. And right now, I guess in the staff report, we have items to consider, but we don't actually have agreement language. Am I reading that right?
Mr. Swanson?
With respect to the question that was last asked, we don't have all the details, such as Mr. Gangler just said, today we determined who's doing maintenance in the area. So we can't draft the agreement to give you something to act upon. We could have given you an agreement with headings on it, but no detail because we don't have enough information. As far as the MOU versus an agreement for a specific location, from the city attorney's perspective, the MOU serves little or no purpose. It may have political purposes. It may have some, it'll be so general that you won't be able to use that to determine who has what responsibility for a particular piece of art or a particular location. The key for that is going to be in your site-specific agreement. I think the MOU is intended to just generally outline some principles. That is, the selection of the art was going to be that of PAC. The approval of a specific location and impacts upon right-of-way or city-owned property would be left to the specific agreements. So we can work on them together, but of the two, your site-specific agreement has far more significance than any generalized memorandum of agreement. So in this case, we don't quite have enough information to finalize the agreement. We need to know, for example, to get CanAd involved, because CanAd will have to sign off on this. How many parking spots are affected, if any? If there are some, where are they? Are they going to be substituted other locations or not? Who has location responsibility for repairs or maintenance? Those are the types of details that need to go into this type of an agreement.
And we'll get that language back to review when you do have the information, and then that's when we'll review that?
Ultimately, the council will have to give approval to a specific site agreement for this piece of art.
Is that satisfactory answers for you, Ms. Mock?
Yeah, that's definitely helpful.
Okay. Did you have any other follow-up questions or comments?
I guess I'm a little concerned that we don't have more of a detailed process for the beautification funds. You know, the set aside was discussed, I do believe we discussed it at budget time. But I guess it works out for this art piece, and so I think we can move that forward without holding this one back, but I would like to see maybe more of a process put in place for how we go about distributing those funds, just so everyone's clear.
Yeah, I would think, Ms. Mock, thank you. Certainly you can't argue that philosophy. Perhaps we could add that as part of the budget process, which will seemingly be started any day now soon. So certainly makes a good point. Mr. Reen, a follow-up?
I was just going to say, I mean, the staff recommended is to direct staff to continue to work with the city attorney's office. I think that's what the motion is. So I think we're kind of aligned. We're not asking for approval. It's authorization to continue to work and bring an agreement back to us that we can react to, right?
Very good. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.5, appointments and reappointments to various committees, Board of Health, appointment of Ms. Mock and Grant Corsmo, reappointments to the Board of Health. Is there a motion? Any comments? Moved by Marshall, second by Veen. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. And item B, Board of Appeals, Mechanical Board and Board of Adjustments. Reappointment of Kent Anderson, Lynn Vreeland, Stacy Kemp, and Mark Peterson to the Board of Adjustment Committee. Appointment of Alicia Fadley and Steve Johnson to the Board of Appeals Committee, and appoint Derek Lunsky and reappoint Dick Anderson to the Mechanical Board. Any comments or questions, concerns related to those people? Moved by Veen, second by Marshall. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.6, plans and specs for project number 7907, District 723, paving street lighting for Opportunity Park First Re-subdivision. Mr. Grasser, good evening.
Thank you, President Sandy. Just a reminder, Opportunity Park is that area on the west side of the interstate, south of 32nd, north of where 40th Avenue South would be. Tonight's action would be for the next step in the special assessments, which would be approving the plans and specifications. The only thing I am going to point out is to catch up with some of the dates. It is going to take a little bit longer than normally. It'd only be about 2 or 3 weeks from the time we do plans and specs till we do the bid opening. This updated timeline will have a bid opening on July 1st. It'll come to the City Council for approval and award in July.
Comments on plans and specs? Motion by Mr. Weigel, second by Doppler. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Lastly, item 2.7, plans and specs for project 7540, District 567, Oscarville Storm Sewer, Storm Pond, Pump Station, and Discharge Ditch. Correct.
Yes, again, we had a good discussion on this last time. We've incorporated all the City Council comments and approvals relative to cost participation. The actual item on the agenda tonight is, again, just approving plans and specs, which is the next process in the special assessments. I do want to note, though, that we are having the public hearing, or not public hearing, public meeting here in City Council tomorrow night with the Oscarville folks. So that'll be from 4:30 to 7:30, open house. If you care to visit sometime during that point in time, that's when we're going to have really the more detailed discussion with the Oscarville folks out there and gauge their what they think about the project, the costs, those types of things. So other than that, it's the actual approval of plans and specs is pretty routine next step.
Any comments or questions? Mr. Weigel moves approval, second by Doppler. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Grasser. Anything else on the agenda? So, per Mr. Grasser's comment, there's a public input meeting for Oscarville tomorrow night on the 12th. Events Center Commission has a Finance and Renovation Committee meeting. I think there's a, Ms. Marshall, when's our library meeting? Is that Thursday evening at 5 p.m., if I recall? At the library, Anybody interested to participate in your local city government? Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Doppler, second by Weigel. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you for being with us tonight. This meeting has been brought to you in part by
Let Grand Forks International Airport help you start your next vacation off on the right foot. Grand Forks International Airport offers flights to the sunny destinations of Orlando, Las Vegas, and Phoenix on Allegiant, and connections anywhere in the world through Minneapolis-St. Paul on Delta. Forget the hassle of long drives, parking nightmares, and stressful check-ins. The convenience of flying locally means less headaches and more time for you. Grand Forks International Airport. Your airport. Simply grand.
How many things in your house connect to the internet? Let's see. Computers, smartphones, gaming console, maybe your appliances and lights. They say that by the year 2020, the average home will have 5 devices for every one person. I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to be average. We're going to need much better internet.
Midco Extreme Gig is here. Life-changing.
Know what's in this box? Well, in case your crystal ball is broken, here's a hint. Safe, reliable energy, for starters, but there's also a commitment to this community. See, at Xcel Energy, this is our hometown. So we're not just about making a living here, we're about living here. Oh, I wish I had wings.
In our community, we're always delivering. Xcel Energy, responsible by nature.
As a farm kid from North Dakota, I was raised to face challenges head-on. But that was put to the test when I was diagnosed with cancer as a teenager. Now, I'm determined to help kids overcome illnesses like I did. So I started my journey at the University of North Dakota. With hard work and determination, I'll help others like my doctors helped me. I'm making my impact. How will you make yours?